Welcome everyone to the Writer's Block, and we're excited to welcome Stephanie Miller back with us today. She has taught for us before and we wanted to revisit with her, and so I'm really grateful for her taking the time out of busy day, lots of kids activities and all the things that she's juggling to talk with us today. So welcome back, Stephanie.
Thank you. Yes, I am so excited to be back and hopefully have better sound quality, as
Yes.
well as kind of refresh my message in terms of what I have shared before on tips and tricks to dress up your story. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we do hear you better today. And we are we're revisiting this kind of idea of how to dress up our writing. So tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and like why this topic? Why are you passionate about this topic?
Okay, of course I hear screaming. Um,
We don't,
yes,
but you're
I
good.
know. So she might need to come in. So I am, can you hold on just 1 second?
You bet. Aw, well, we will just cut this part out. But we know what it's like to have the little ones underfoot all the time.
And when it's not the kids, it's the dog.
Right? I know. I have my dog, so I have my dog on a one of these. It's a little bark collar. So I can wring his neck basically when he barks and when I'm recording. So, well, while we're
Poor
waiting,
Stephanie.
tell us the temperature where you're at.
It's 78 degrees here, unbelievably.
We have
Wow, where are you,
Fro-
Cheryl?
We're Southwest Michigan. We had frost on the ground yesterday morning, and now it's sunny and beautiful and feels like summer again.
Oh, that sounds really lovely.
Hmm.
Cold enough that you need long sleeves, right?
Yeah, yeah, in the mornings for
Wait, what did
sure.
you say? 78 degrees?
Yeah, 78, yeah.
Yeah, for Kara, that's cold enough to need long
Oh yeah,
sleeves.
I'm
I
like in a
know,
parka.
I'm laughing. I'm like, whoo, I don't know.
To me,
I'm
that's cold.
freezing at 68 here.
Is
Yeah,
it?
we've got
Nice.
78 in Metro Detroit. I'm not that far from Cheryl. And
Right.
I've got on a long sleeve, but I don't need it.
Yeah.
Wow,
There
and
she
I'm
is.
at 70, you guys. It's colder in
Oh, that's
Phoenix
so
than it is where
beautiful.
you are. How nice.
All
All
right.
right, well, Stephanie's back. Are you good to go?
I'm back and I'm good to go. Yeah, long story short, but she's going to be here right now and she's hopefully going to be content and we will just do the best that we can, because that's what we're going with today. So
Well, welcome.
thank you.
Well, I think you were introducing yourself and
Did
telling
you want to stop the recording and restart or do you
No,
want
it's
to?
okay.
Okay.
We're
All
fine.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
is real life. Everyone here knows. So,
That's
tell
very
us a
true.
little bit
Yes.
about you, Stephanie, and why this topic is near and dear to your heart.
Absolutely. My name is Stephanie Miller. I am a multi-published author, a speaker, and a spiritual growth and writing coach. And so I work with women who feel called and led to write and share their message and their story and help equip them with the clarity, consistency, and confidence they need in order to get their story and their message from here out into the world. I'm passionate about this particular topic specifically because I feel that when we are writing, we need to make sure that we are writing and addressing the right type of material and speaking to our readers in the way that invites them in to a journey of transformation. And that goes for fiction and nonfiction. And so being able to share these little tips and these little ideas of how to make sure that you are writing and sharing your story well goes right along with the message of being able to make sure that your book and your story is ultimately giving God glory and is putting out your best foot forward.
So you alliterated something. You said clarity, confidence, I think. Was there
And
another?
consistency.
And consistency. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
And I think that so much of like what we're doing when we're writing is like, as in the heart of the writer, we're trying to kind of figure out some of those things, right? And how to dress up our own writing so that we can convey our words in a more winsome way. So, I know that you do some developmental editing with writers. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yes. So developmental editing looks at big picture. You're looking at overall theme, overall message, and overall takeaway. So for nonfiction, you're looking at, do you have a clear theme? Do you have a clear main idea? Is it structured logically? And is it consistent? As well as, are you reducing any of the stuff that is not contributing to your main idea and whatever capacity that looks like? For fiction, then, developmental editing is focused on the story advancing and keeping the pacing and the flow in what that looks like. So again, big picture, I always go from kind of this idea of macro to micro and looking at how your overall idea and your overall theme or your overall story and plot and how that is moving forward.
Yeah. Well, we can hear the little one there contributing
Yes.
that.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah, I think when we're writing, we're often like, at least I'm asking myself all these questions like, do I need this detail? Do I need this word? Is this sentence, have I already said this sentence? I think I said this in different words a few sentences ago, right? And so we're kind of looking at, I like how you put that, like advancing the big idea. And no matter what you're writing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, you are trying to convey a big idea of some form or function. So when you're working with writers, and I know that like in the publishing process, there's the developmental editing process, and then there's also the copy editing. So if developmental is kind of macro, would you say copy editing is micro? Like we're getting down into the nuts and bolts.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So copy editing is more like commas and punctuation and grammar and all of those things, right?
Yes, and I think even beyond that, copy editing looks at your consistency in formatting, your spelling, your typos, punctuation, grammar, mechanics. And a real quick way I kind of denote the difference between developmental editing and copy editing is developmental editing asks, is this clear? But copy editing asks, is this correct? And so kind of distinguishing between those two.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Clear versus correct. And you need both, right?
You
You need
absolutely
both.
need both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you think about how to, or how you personally coach and help writers with their developmental editing, their copy editing, making it clear, making it correct, what are some questions that writers could be asking themselves, or what are the questions you're asking yourself as you're reading somebody else's work that can kind of um, move that writer along to that more clear and more correct place in their writing?
I'm going to go drop her off and then I will answer you. Give me 1 second.
Sure. I was trying to like fill in some space because I could see she was.
Her little face.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, bless her heart.
Thank you guys for your patience, whether you're here live or watching the replay. And we'll cut this stuff out in the podcast.
It's all good to stop and be still for a minute, right?
Absorb.
Yeah.
Okay, questions to ask yourself when considering developmental editing and kind of shaping your piece as you're beginning to write. The first thing I would say is for fiction, you want to know what the need of the piece that you're writing is. And ultimately, the genre and the reader expectations drive the need and shape how you're starting to write your fiction piece. Now, for nonfiction, you are still looking at meeting the needs of your reader, but it looks a little bit different. It looks at kind of the pain points and the struggles and being able to meet them where they're at. And then, like I mentioned before, take them on that journey with you. And so asking yourself, what is the need of my reader in both fiction and nonfiction is a great kind of basic level to get that started. The next question that I would ask is, why are you including a piece of information, a story, an example, an illustration for nonfiction, or a scene, a dialogue interchange, or something like that for fiction? And the idea here, again, is that you are either advancing your story and your content forward by the plot in fiction, or you're advancing it by a character development in fiction. So essentially, we're kind of starting to piece out, are we using this dialogue to advance a character, or are we using this dialogue to shape a plot for fiction? Or for nonfiction, are we looking at using story and illustration and other examples to further enhance our takeaway? And so one thing I like to consider is, are we informing, are we inspiring, or are we entertaining? And so the idea is that we need all of it, informing, inspiring, and entertaining, but at different times and at different points within whatever piece that we're writing. And so from understanding what the purpose of the sentence or the illustration or the scene is, will help us then be able to see how it fits in the overall picture. So then we can start to add in those fun things, right? Those accessories. The title of this talk is How to Dress Up Your Story. So if we have kind of our basic outfit, we know where we're going, whether it is to the grocery store or to church, we're going to dress differently perhaps. And from kind of that base idea, we can start to layer on additional details and additional accessories to help our story and our message sparkle and shine, regardless if it's fiction or nonfiction.
I like the illustration of the outfit, right? I think we can all identify with sometimes less is more. Sometimes, you need to pull back and kind of edit your clothing, your outfit, maybe a smoky eye doesn't need a bright red lip. Right. But then there are times when adding and kind of accessorizing and adding to it, I think is really good. And you said you're asking yourself whether you're inspiring, you're informing, or you're educating. And that's another good way to kind of think through, if you're inspiring somebody, your tone might be a little different versus if you're educating somebody, you might be a little bit more direct, right? And kind of straightforward in the way you're approaching that writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we know why we are including what we're including, we know what purpose it serves, then we can be sure that we are continuing to keep the flow, keep the clarity, and keep the pacing forward. So you're reducing redundancies. That's another thing you do as a developmental editor. Just so many people want to restate one idea and they want to state it again in a different way and state it again in a different way. And this idea of learning how to effectively help the reader be able to understand where you're going without telling them where they are going. I like to say that readers are smart, they're intuitive, and you don't necessarily need to lay it all out there for them. They want to be able to close their eyes and imagine and start to pick and piece and even guess where you're going. And then, of course, if you're writing fiction, if you throw a plot twist in there, then that's just an extra bonus, right? They're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But the idea is that each word or each example or illustration you are sharing is advancing your story, and it's advancing your narrative forward in whatever capacity it needs to.
That's super helpful. So, when you think about like dressing up your writing, do you have a process for that? Do you have maybe like a fit list, so to speak, of what you're kind of looking for in a way to dress it up? Because I would imagine that, when we think about dressing up, like I always think that's kind of the fun part. Often getting the words on the page, that's the really hard part. Like if you're using the same metaphor, like you're trying on all these different clothes and you're trying to see which looks best and fits best. But once you have the outfit, you can accessorize it. So like playing off of that theme, do you have a checklist that you kind of work through in your own mind or in the people you're working with as they're looking at their work?
Yes, I do. And I will say that going along the lines of making sure what you are writing and including serves the purpose, we're going to wear different shoes to serve a different function. So a pair of tennis shoes is going to serve a different function than a pair of sandals at the beach. So again, just keeping all of that in mind. But really starting at the base, here's that checklist using the metaphor that I like to go through. It is to determine where you are going. So it's kind of like assessing your closet, determine what the need is, whether it's what the need of your reader is for nonfiction or the genre expectations or the tropes for fiction. So looking at it as kind of assessing your closet. Where am I going today? Then we start to what I alluded to before, kind of stick and pick out those basic pieces, those basic outfits of our story and of our message. So we start to take information. If it's nonfiction, we start to take the informational components of our story, maybe the facts, and then we start to layer on maybe what we thought about that piece of our story and how it made us feel and the consequences and the emotions behind it. And we start to kind of layer it deeper and deeper, just starting to have the overall flow of from the beginning of where you are at to the end of where you're at. And that is really the same for fiction as well. You look at just developing that overall character arc or that overall journey of transformation where your main character is for the beginning and then how they are different at the end. Throwing in just those basic guidelines and those basic understandings of here we have this point, here we have this point, here we have this point. And then from there, we can start to accessorize. And as we were talking about accessorizing, Kara, I know that there's a quote by Coco Chanel and it says, look in the mirror and before you walk out the door, take one thing off. And so oftentimes when we are looking at dressing up our story and message and adding those fun details and making sure our adverbs are eliminated and making sure that we're using a lot of sensory detail and description, sometimes we can go overboard, right? It's like a big chunky necklace and a big like drop down earrings when you really only need one or the other. And so when we start to accessorize by, different verbs that are more accurate, we start to accessorize by making sure we are showing and not telling and making sure that we have smooth and clear transitions. That's when we start to shape more of the outfit itself and it becomes less of just clothes put together and then it becomes a complete polished piece. Then, of course, after we take our clothes and we have them on and we've picked out maybe some bracelets, which would be, specific verb phrases, and then we've made sure that we are showing and not telling, we go in the mirror and we hopefully look at ourselves before we walk out the door. And so it's checking for fit, checking for flow, checking for consistency in that way. I always recommend reading your story or whatever it is, the written piece aloud, just to kind of keep that cadence and to keep that consistency and to ensure that there is clarity. And another great bonus is actually to have your story read to you. I can't tell you when we are actually writing our message, we will read it as we think we have written it, but that's not necessarily the case. And AI models who use Word, for example, I use that talk read aloud version in Word, will read it the way that they think it is. And so you can tell right away if you are a little overly wordy or if you are using too much detail, too much example, you can kind of hear it in that voice. And so taking that understanding of, does this fit well? Does this flow well? I might really want to wear a very pretty bracelet right now, but if I were to do that, as you can tell, I talk with my hands and it would be distracting. So it's much of the same.
Yeah, I
And
like,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
I like
yeah, I
that.
mean, that was my wrap up. Yeah, that was my
Okay.
wrap up. Just kind of taking it from the basics of form and function to style and fit and flow, and then being able to just be mindful of what will be distracting and then what also enhances.
I have used the read aloud. I don't know what it is, if it's an add-on or something that you get with the word program, but it's really good because sometimes, even the robot will get like, you're like, whoa, that was a long sentence. Even the robot had a hard time like getting that out. And so that's a good indicator that like you need to pare down there. So that's a great tip. That's a great tip. Well, just wanted to let everyone on the call feel free. Do you have any questions about that? Or do you maybe feel like there's something that you're struggling with in your own writing that maybe you could ask Stephanie about? Maybe an area where it's like, gosh, how can I like shore this area up? Or I seem to always do this.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi,
Um,
Cheryl.
so I'm working on a novel, first time I've written a novel. I was kind of piecing it together today and kind of doing a big sweep through it. And I'm seeing of what I have so far. And I am seeing some things where I'm repeating kind of what the theme of the story is, that God still knows this woman's name, okay, and names. And I see that keep popping up. How much is too much? Because I totally understand what you're saying when you say readers want to figure some things out. I'm that kind of reader. I'm like, don't spoon feed me. Let me figure some things out and put things together. But how much is too much? And is there a minimum that you should have to kind of keep it in the reader's mind?
That's a great question. Is the overall plot of your story, is it demonstrating that main message?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay. Okay.
In small ways throughout, I guess. It's
Okay.
kind of a thing that she starts to notice through the story.
So breadcrumbs, like deposits developing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. I think there is a fine line between sitting there and reminding the reader repeatedly versus gently nudging them and being like, hey, remember, we found this treasure over here. And guess what? Now we get to add this treasure, and all of these treasures are going to come together and they're creating something. And so I do feel that there is a balance. And I wish I had a clear-cut answer of only this many times. But I think the answer and the best way to evaluate that really is, are you gently reminding them of something that they know, but also leading them towards a new direction? Or are you simply just reminding them of what they know? Because everything should be kind of additive and building on. So I think there's a difference to understand between having an understanding of knowing if you are reminding them that you have showed them this truth and then adding another truth on top versus just reminding them that you have shown them the truth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
So I try to use the thesaurus just on the computer to eliminate some redundancy of using words. But sometimes I feel like I use words that like even sometimes the computer doesn't want to acknowledge. But I kind of when I read, I like to read things that have words in it that I need to go look up and study. I know I'm kind of weird that way probably, but I kind of I worry that I'm using words that are a little too not I'm not saying, they're like hoity-toity words. They're just like some of them are old words.
Yeah.
Um I don't know, is that
What is the type of book that you're writing? Maybe that will help kind of
so
bring.
what I'm working on right now is a historical fiction.
Well, then, yeah, you absolutely need to use
Yeah, old
older.
words.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that fits within the theme and the overall context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like
And
you're using words that your reader won't know unless they Can you give it to
Well,
them
you can,
as an example to kind of illustrate the word?
so,
Yeah.
well, on one thing that I wrote, it was an opening for a retreat I was speaking at, and it was the word for a rocky island, and the word was scary, Skerry. And the computer kept trying to change it, and I'm like, no, that is an old word for a rocky island. And I left it in there. I want, I haven't published it or anything yet, but I did enter it into a writing contest. So anyway, now that's one. And then, oh, sorry, I thought I turned that off. The another word for tired is like, or lethargic is synome. I'm looking right. I'm trying to find it in my writing. But it's just an older word for tired and drunk. So
When you include it, do you use that word, like the word that you used for the rocky island? Do you use that word and say comma a rocky island, or do you just use it as
no,
such
but
and
by the
include-
context, you can tell that that's what it is.
Yeah.
Same with like the word that I used for tired was it was the crew of the sitting at the captain's table had had enough wine that they had become subdued, and so but I used a different word. Let me see, I can probably even find it real quick. Somnolent, SOMNOLENT. That was just an older word for like
Sorry, that's
drunk.
fine. Yeah.
Falling asleep drunk.
Yeah. And it doesn't just sound like they're, they've had enough wine that they've calmed down now. They weren't so rowdy. So anyway, I don't know. I just am trying to, the fiction writing is a little bit, especially at this, I've done a lot of kids kind of stuff, but this is a little bit different. So just getting my feet wet with it. So
Yeah, I would encourage you honestly to stick to your voice. And so that sounds like that's your voice. That's what you like to do. And I do think that there would be an element of where your readers who are reading historical fiction would appreciate that, right? Whether it is a specific, genre word that you were referencing, or just a new word that you can kind of pique their interest and open up their imagination.
Yeah, that's a good question, Carrie.
That was.
okay, I'm going to ask too. You guys were talking about the AI with Word reading your story to you. I've been looking for that and I can't find it. What is it called? Or is it just in your regular Word?
I think it's under, there's a menu at the top and it says read aloud. And you
Okay,
can click that.
yeah, and I had seen that and then I went to look for it and I couldn't find it. I guess I'll just have to dig deeper.
I don't
It's
know.
under review. I'm looking at it right
Okay.
now. If you just have click
Okay.
the review, and then it'll give you read aloud, and then you can just have it read aloud to you. It is
Okay.
very, very helpful.
Okay. And along those lines, since I'm talking, one of the things that I've done with other writings is I've run them through like some of the readability level.
Yes.
And it kind of tells you like how many words you have per sentence, how many sentences per paragraph, what age group or what grade level it is. Recovering educator, so that's always
that is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's important for us to evaluate those type of aspects of our writing, because again, what we think we're saying or what we think is coming across might be a little bit different than how it is being perceived. And so I do think that it's important to have kind of a checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Go ahead, Christina.
So, been writing a lot of microfiction lately. And one of the issues that I have is that I'm using Hemingway to look at it after it's done. And I'll end up with complicated sentences and very complicated. But at the same time, I don't want to just have like da, 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 da. So like, is there a way to figure out how to get that fine line between a complex thought and an uncomplicated sentence?
That is a very good question. A very good question. I think it actually would help to, number one, I always kind of vary it when I'm doing more of the line editing, which is the line by line and the sentence and paragraph level. I'm looking at just a variation between the simple sentences and the complex sentences. So just kind of making sure you don't have 5 complex sentences in a row, or, 4 3-word sentences in a row, things like that, as just one general rule of thumb. And I also really like this continuation of listening to word, read it aloud, because you will hear it. You will hear it if it's just too cumbersome, if it's just too much in one thought, because you won't hear the pause until the period or the comma. And so you'll be able to kind of hear, like, this detail is great for you to read, but maybe it is just a little bit too much. And I think one of the other points I wanted to say is when we are showing by providing details and examples and additional descriptions, we again want to make sure that all of that detail is driving that plot forward and driving that narrative forward. So if I'm setting up a scene and I'm going to tell you and describe how someone is afraid, but then I also throw in that he's wearing a red shirt and has blue eyes, that might not continue to drive the plot forward. Sure, it can help you, understand that he has blue eyes and is wearing a red shirt. But unless that is significant, you kind of want to piece out each scene and say, how is this driving the story forward? Is it by plot or is it by character development? And so each thing then is building on one another so you can see the end result. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, Hemingway's you mean you meant the tool Hemingway, right? Is that what you meant, Christina?
Yes, the tool.
Okay. I was gonna say Ernest is good too, right?
I know.
Right. But Ernest isn't good for that.
No,
No.
he can ramble. Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Stephanie, is there any other advice, maybe kind of wrapping up our talk, that you might offer to writers who want to dress up their story or their writing?
So let's see. I think I had a couple of other quick points that I didn't mention before. And then I have some really fun exercises that I want to leave as a challenge for everyone. Because who doesn't love a challenge, right? I think the other point that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention before is making sure when you are showing and not telling, I know we say it all the time, is just to encourage you not to use the words that are narrative distance. And that includes words like saw, felt, heard, noticed, smelled. So instead of telling me she felt the warmth on her face, perhaps another way to say it that kind of immerses me in her experience is the sun beat down on her face, its warmth seeping into her skin. Do you see the difference here? The sun beat down on her face versus explaining and describing the motion. And so that actually is quite tricky to do, to remove those filter words, because we use them all the time, especially when we think that we are showing and not telling. So one of the ways to do that is, instead of telling me she felt, she noticed, she looked, but just encouraging you to go right away. What did she feel? What did she notice? What did she see? And then the other key point I wanted to mention really is relating to transitions. I think that some of us have a tendency to be great at transitions and maybe use over transitions by over explaining. I can move on to this point because this point connects to this other point. And then others of us are just kind of like, I've talked about this and now I'm going to shuffle and continue to move this way. And I think one tip there to be able to ensure that your transitions are flowing nicely is to make sure that you have provided a link or connection between the first idea and the next idea. And so that could be a sentence or a phrase, but just ensuring and not underestimating the power of a transition, especially in fiction. I mean, we can have a transition within a character's disposition in the beginning of a scene versus the end of the scene. And we want to highlight that because that might contribute overall to the character development. And then, of course, the actual physical scene changes where a location might have started here and then the location changed upon whatever action the character was doing. So just not underestimating the power of transitions and the movement and the flow from one scene or one thought or idea if you are writing nonfiction. And then if you're ready for your challenge.
Yeah, give it to us.
Yes. So this is actually something that I did in a in-person writing group that I'm a part of. The leader she thinks very outside of the box. And the only way that I can kind of explain this is if you want to grow in your capacity and your ability to shape and refine your words, that there are 2 different exercises that I recommend. The first one actually is to be able to retell a specific memory or moment in your life using an acrostic of your name or someone else's name. But that kind of puts in the variation of maybe how we want to describe a story initially with all of the detail and all of the example. And then you practice reducing it and making it condensed and concise, and even throwing in the acrostic to help vary up some interesting elements of it. And so I can give you an example of that if you would like to
Yeah,
hear
for
an
sure.
example. Yeah. So pulling it up in my writing group, the lady who I was working with, so this was a pair exercise for us. The lady that I was working with, her name was Tracy. And so we did a acrostic exercise where she was telling me her story of going to a concert with her brother. And so she was describing it and she was describing it. And my assignment, if you will, was to take her story, several paragraphs of how they went to the concert, what the concert was, and everything like that, and move it over into what would be in the acrostic. So let me find that. Okay, so the acrostic was her name, Tracy Dawn. And so here's the story that we shaped from using the acrostic. There was a really weird concert she attended with her brother on a college campus. Yankovic, Weird Al, dancing and acting crazy, accentuating big curly hair and unusual laughter and story, with a nice memory made. And so I tried to emphasize using those letters and using those, using the acrostic to help guide your telling of the story. Another fun thing to try would actually be to retell a story or a memory or an experience in your life using alliteration. And so just playing with these different styles of writing and retelling, and the best way that I could describe it is if you've ever seen the show Chopped on the Food Network, they have those ingredients, right? And you have those ingredients, and sometimes you have only a certain tool. Maybe you need to make soup and you don't have a pot. So it's getting creative in terms of having a certain amount of elements and giving yourself these challenges to stretch beyond just maybe telling your story, and maybe even stretch beyond just trying to simplify your story. But by adding fun things like an acrostic or an alliteration, or even trying to change up a story into a poem, for example, might just be another way to kind of keep building up that writing muscle and to help you feel confident into exploring and engaging other types of literary styles.
That would be really fun. That'd be a good little challenge. We can do that in the block someday. But yeah, I think that's great. So was the exercise for the acrostic, was that just to get out of your own head and kind of stretch your vocab, your storytelling technique? Is that how you would use something like that? Like maybe if you're stuck in a scene or you're stuck on explaining a concept, do something like that? Is that how you would use that?
I think that's one way you could use it, just to kind of help get you out of your own way of thinking and just go to expanding your understanding and expanding the way that you are going to talk about your story or talk about your experience. I think it also allows for you to really pin down the main points and the main ideas. If I were to give you a long-winded explanation of a story and experience, but then you only have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 letters for an acrostic. The idea is that it is a new creative way to be able to reduce and sharpen and refine your message and your story, so only the key elements that drive the story forward will be present.
Really good. That's a good tip.
Yeah, unusual, right? I knew I
Yeah.
was
No,
gonna
I
throw
would
something
never have
very
thought of that.
unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have to
Yeah.
keep it interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to like shock the brain waves a little bit
Yeah.
into thinking outside the box, like you said. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really great. Thank you, Stephanie, so much for kind of sharing these tips and tricks with us about how to dress up our story. Where can we follow you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So I am very active on Substack and Instagram. So my Substack is Live and Create Transformed. And my Instagram is a little easier. It's Stephanie Miller Coach. So I post all things related to maybe developmental editing, tips and tricks, everything related to equipping you with clarity, consistency, and confidence to really live out and walk out and write out that message and story that you feel God is calling you to write. I also throw in some things related to creativity and spiritual growth, and as well as some information on what it's like to be a mom juggling all of the things. So if that's something you're interested, I would love to have you join me on there. And also that checklist that I went through early on, I would love to provide you all with a copy of it. You don't just email me and I just write the word checklist in, and I would love to provide you with that checklist of talking about going into your closet, assessing what you need to wear, all the way down to, is your accessory distracting or is it placed just right? Kind of further highlighting and further emphasizing that main point. And so,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Tell us your email address, and
Yes.
if you want, you can put it in the chat, but tell if anyone is watching this replay where they can do that.
Yeah. So my email address is Stephanie@butterfly, BUTTERFLY, beginnings. I know it's a long one. Butterfly dash. So there's a dash in there. Beginnings, BEGINNINGS.com. And I did throw it in the chat. So if you just want to email me and write checklist, I will send you that checklist, and hopefully that'll help you continue to dress up and share your story well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We got to see you firsthand juggling all the things. So thank you for doing that. You did it well. And we're just really grateful for you and for these tips and tricks. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. This was an honor to be able to share, and thank you for your grace and your understanding as we navigated things today.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.